Okay, so we've got this seam sewn. This is the wrong side. Here's my sleeve, here's my garment, here's my shirt. So now what I'm going to do, because this seam is actually going to end up in a welt seam. And so we're going to finish the top stitching on the garment side, on the shirt side. So now I've got to trim this seam. And if you remember the welt seam from your jacket, you trim the one seam down to 1/4 of an inch. Then you take your other seam and you fold it 1/4 of an inch, and then you lay it over top of the other seam. So that's what we're going to do. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the shirt side. Okay, so I'm going to grab my seam allowance on the shirt side. Make sure you get the right one, and make sure you don't trim your shirt. You only want to trim the seam allowance. You got to be careful. So I always put my fingers behind it. Okay, so that I know I'm just getting, I always put my fingers kind of right here, so I know I'm just getting the seam. Okay, and we're going to trim this shirt side to 1/4 of an inch. Okay, and I'm just going to eyeball this because I've done this a lot. And also this this 1/4 inch that I'm doing here right now is not as critical, I should say, as other times. So I'm not going to measure this every step of the way, and you don't need to either. Just go ahead and trim that down to 1/4. But if you don't know where 1/4 is, then yes, measure it, because if you look on your ruler at what 1/4 is, it's like that much. It's not very big. So go ahead and trim this, and again I just put my fingers right behind it. After you sew this seam, you want to make sure that you didn't get any tucks or anything. All right, so I'll check and make sure I didn't, but I would be able to tell if I did, but we can look at it. Okay, so now where I go over the yoke, I'm actually cutting 2 layers, because the yoke is 2 layers. Okay, so there again, there's my 1/4 inch. Okay, so every once in a while, if you just want to check yourself with a ruler or a tape measure, or a seam gauge is good too. But I don't have a seam gauge with me right now. So, okay, there we go. So I've got the one side trimmed. So I should probably, let's look and make sure everything looks really good. See, everything's nice and smooth along that seam. We don't have any little tucks. If you get a little tuck, just unpick it a little bit, like an inch around it, or a little bit above, a little bit below, and just resew that one area. Okay, so that looks good. All right, so now I've got that part done. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to use the tailor's ham, because I need a good curved edge here.